Sometimes from the outside looking in, marriage can seem like the best thing in the world, and it can be. But if you're married, you know that marriage is work.
Right. It's not easy, and especially during times like these where it feels like every single day you hear about another divorce. So today, we're going to talk about how you can strengthen your Christian marriage, so stay tuned.
What's up, everybody? This is Ronnie
And Mel.
And on this channel, we give you weekly tools and inspiration to help you find God and walk with Him in your daily life. So if that's something you need, consider subscribing and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode.
So, how to strengthen your Christian marriage. That is what we are going to be talking about today. First, we're going to find out what the Bible says about it, and then we're going to walk you through some of our favorite marriage resources that you and your spouse can go through together.
So let's jump in and find out how you can strengthen your marriage God's way. So first off, let's be honest to the fact that marriage is hard and marriage is work. Like anything in life, if you want to do well in it, you have to invest time and dedication into it. I was an athlete, so I understand what it takes to actually excel in something. And it's no different in marriage.
That also means that if there are issues, they don't just go away. You can't just sweep it under the rug and hope that it's going to go away. And just think about it. When you have two imperfect people all of a sudden becoming one and doing life together, obviously there are going to be issues, even as Christians.
Because we all have areas in our life that God is working on in us. So there are personal issues and relational issues that marriage can bring up. And a lot of time God uses marriage to expose those issues so we can work on them.
A quote from one of our favorite books on this topic is this: "What if marriage is meant to make us holy rather than happy?" Because God's goal with marriage isn't just to make you happy. It's actually to conform you into the image of His Son. But that means we have to say yes to the process.
And so if this concept is new to you, make sure you guys watch this video so you can really understand God's purpose for marriage. We'll link it up in the cards or down in the description below.
All right, so what does the Bible have to say about this? The first verse that comes to mind is Psalm 37:4, which says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." We firstly must understand that it's actually not our spouse's job to give us the desires of our heart and to fill that void. It's actually God's job. Only God can truly satisfy. So if we're not going to God and seeking our fulfillment from Him, we will constantly be trying to suck it out of our spouse.
But they were never meant for that. Marriage and our love for one another has to flow from Him and His love for us. That is why a 3-braided cord is not easily broken. He has to be in the center. So find ways to strengthen your relationship with God, both separately and as a couple. The next scripture that comes to mind is Ephesians 5, where Paul's talking to husbands and wives.
First, he says to us ladies, "Wives, submit to your husband as to the Lord. As the church submits to Christ, so also wives are to submit to their husbands in everything." God has ordained our husbands to be the head over our families. And so when we submit to Him, even though He's not perfect, we actually are obeying and trusting God. And also, the church serves Christ. And so when we serve our husbands in love, it's as if we're serving Christ Himself.
Paul then tells us men, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave Himself for her." And if that's not one of the hardest verses in the Bible, I don't know what is. So when we lay our lives down for our wives and love her the same way that Jesus does, we are obeying God. And when we do that, it brings God into our marriage. And not only that, when our wives know that our decisions are made to best serve her and her relationship with God, it will be easier for her to submit and trust our leadership.
This whole concept is laid out in a book we will talk more about later called Love and Respect. God's love for us was a sacrificial one. And so when we sacrificially love one another, we are putting on display God's love for them. So wives, think of some ways that you can encourage your husband in the way that he leads you. That way he will feel like you respect him. And then think of some ways that you can serve him to really show that you love and care for him.
And husbands, take some time to pray and ask the Lord how you can best lead and serve your wife. This way she'll feel taken care of and know that you care about her relationship with God. Like I said, marriage is work, but it's always worth it.
And the last verse that comes to mind is, without vision, the people perish. God created marriage as a way of putting his love on display for the world to see, and also as a way of partnering with him in his mission, which is the Great Commission. And he knew that that sense of purpose, even in our marriage together, would strengthen our bond with one another.
And even if you and your spouse have different careers, you can still be doing them unto a common goal for God. So take some time and dream together. Pray together and get a vision for making a difference in the church and out into the world through your marriage.
So to recap, the 3 things we want to encourage you in to strengthen your marriage is this. 1, strengthen your relationship with God. 2, serve one another in love. And 3, serve the Lord together through your marriage. Now let's jump into our favorite Christian resources that you can go through together to strengthen your marriage.
And just so you know, we'll put all of the links for these down in the description below so you can check them out for yourself. We also have an article with all this info, so make sure you check it out on our website. For our book recommendations, here's what we have done in the past. We would buy 2 copies, then read a chapter or 2 weekly individually, and then we would come together and talk through our thoughts. So see what works for you.
The first one is Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas, though it actually looks like this now. The quote we used earlier about marriage being more about holiness than happiness is actually the whole concept of this book, and understanding how God uses our marriage to actually conform us to be more like him. I actually read it before I even thought of dating, but it gave me such a good perspective of what my future marriage would be unto. And so when things get hard, you understand that there's actually a greater purpose than just being happy and having a marriage that looks awesome. God is using your marriage. He's using those trials. He's using the rubbing up against one another to make us more like him. So you can get this book on its own, or there's a workbook and a DVD study series that you and your spouse could go through together. And there's even a daily devotional that the 2 of you could read every morning so that there's something that day that you're working on together.
The second is The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. This was one of the most recommended books for us before we got married. And like the last, you can just get the book or get it with a DVD and a workbook study as well. And not only are these resources great for your marriage, they also make great gifts for newlyweds so they can get started off on the right foot.
The next 2 resources are by a pastor and an author we really enjoy, Jimmy Evans. He wrote the book, The Right One, which we read when we were preparing to get married, when we were dating, and we basically recommend it to everyone. But he also has 4 Laws of Love and Marriage on the Rock for when you're married. And both of these books actually have discussion guides if you like to go through the books together, have discussions, or maybe even do a small group with other couples.
Next is You and Me Forever by Francis Chan, Marriage in Light of Eternity. And this deals with our third point, to use your marriage for God's purposes. It really gives you an eternal perspective and how the 2 of you can be on a mission for him. You can also get that with a workbook so you can write down and think about your vision as a couple.
And remember point 2 about serving one another in love? Well, that is where this next book comes in. It's the 5 Love Languages Couples Edition. Because believe it or not, each one of us has different ways of how we need to feel loved by our spouse. And so with this book, the 2 of you get to take a test and you get to find out how to best love one another. And you can also be reminded to do it daily with their 1-year daily devotional.
And lastly, there's the Love and Respect book, talking about how wives need to be loved by their husbands and how husbands need to feel respected by their spouses. This is such a popular book, and they have lots of teachings that go along with it. You can find them all in the description below.
And one last thing we want to mention is Christian marriage counseling, because sometimes marriages or individuals in that marriage need real deep healing, especially if there's been hurt, a breaking of trust, or just past issues you just can't seem to work through. So to see if Christian counseling could be a benefit to either you or your marriage, all you have to do is go to faithfulcounseling.com/Ronnie and Mel, or you can find the links to it up here or down in the description below.
And like I said, marriage takes work, but it's worth it to invest even the time, the money, and the energy to making your relationship whole and healthy. There's no shame in getting the help you need, and sometimes it's wise to have an outside voice speaking into your marriage. So hopefully that gives you some concepts and some resources to strengthen your marriage. During a time when everything seems harder and it always seems easier to quit, let's fight for our marriage together.
And remember that you are not alone, but it's always a journey and a process that God uses and rewards. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you think it might encourage someone you know, make sure to share it.
And we want to hear from you. So what have you found out that strengthens your marriage? And what has been the hardest part? Let us know down below.
So as always, we hope this continues to help you on your journey to find God and walk with Him, and we will see you next time.